Hello, Koichi Shiroma, product development for Developer Portal API program at FactSet. Welcome. Just to start off, in case people aren't familiar, FactSet is a financial information company. We deliver workstation products, data, and this is our mission statement, building leading open content analytics platform, delivers an advantage for our clients' success. So we are a client-obsessed organization. Some logistics, 20 countries, 37 offices, 170,000 end users, 10,000 employees, and a pretty impressive streak of 42 years of growth in a row. We also have some acquisitions, some labels that are a little more popular. QSIP, anybody should know, working in capital markets. True Value, ESG company. Portware, portfolio management, execution, and Vermilion on trade reporting. So our solution suite goes from your classic workstation by end user, easy to install, easy to use, lots of analytics, web versions, mobile. We also provide web components to make it easy to embed into OpenFin and, oh man, I'm blanking on the second one, for the Open UI frameworks that are now kind of getting popular in financial service markets. We have a division that does portals and dashboards for websites and wealth management, feeding data, custom building to your specs, and obviously APIs and data feeds for those that have the capabilities to build on their own, partnerships through the likes of Snowflake and ADX as well. Okay, so now to the dev portal part. We got the FactSet stuff down. So we begin with pretty standard checklist of what a developer portal has. Right, you got your API catalog, you got your specs and your Swagger doc, your Swagger UI renderer, you got your code snippets, you got your SDKs, notebooks, Medium articles, GitHub repo, and of course, Postman workspace, right? So all the basics covered, and then moving on to the more interesting notions. So let's see. What are the differences between that? Finished all the commonalities. Now, conventional wisdom says open everything when it comes to APIs, right? A lot of technology companies want to be as open as possible. Open API spec, OAS standard, has the word open in it. When it comes to financial API developer portals, though, we have some restrictions when it comes to mainly around content licensing and potentially around details of workflow and other regulations that are not always going to be so open. And so we try to open as much as possible, but without risking anything when it comes to the client in terms of data, privacy, security. And we cannot lose the client's trust when it comes to that. Cannot push the envelope too much, and so that kind of zero risk tolerance policy on openness is important, right? You have to keep that. Right, so even with all that, I think you'll notice if you search around for information around financial API, you'll find that FactSet tends to be more open than others. So we do try and embrace it as much as possible, but again, no risk to us or our clients or the industry. Second point, capabilities provide unambiguous outcomes. So when it comes to things like Twilio or Twitter or Amazon, when you're trying to feed a shopping cart, the end goal is completely unambiguous, right? You're trying to send a payment through Stripe, even if it's a little bit complicated due to locality or international transaction. from beginning to end, there is a path of success that it's the job of the API owners to properly educate and design an interface that fits that workflow. But in the end, that outcome is always the same, no matter what kind of client you are. Your success is determined by how well that API works. In our space, the capabilities that we're delivering to the client, whether it's data or analytics, are just the beginning of their workflow. That is not a result that they're looking for. They're going to go and integrate that data or analytic or risk metric or whatever it is, the reporting, and begin their journey from there. And so we struggle with understanding their use after we've had the API, and it makes it much more challenging in terms of selling the capabilities, right? You could have time series data ends up being for backtesting or coming up with a new algo or trade reporting, suspicious trading, tons and tons of different use cases, even though that's one API, right? It's not just about this one flow that leads to a success. So what have we tried to do in that space we find interesting? Coming up with the concept of recipes to show the art of the possible for the client and making it as relevant as possible to what their actual real-life examples are. So here we have generating a public book of information that automatically searches your Outlook, finds the ticker for the company that you're going to meet, pulls out some relevant fundamental data, lets you know how much money they've made, what their financials look like, puts that all in your Outlook so you can view it right before you go into your client meeting when you're trying to sell them your services, whether that's financial or insurance or even technology. But we can't be too overly prescriptive. There's no one way to do this, right? If they're not using Outlook, they're not necessarily not a customer, right? We'll just integrate whatever that other email system is. So it's a balance between being creative with the solution, understanding what pieces of the recipe are relevant to their exact workflow in the end, but showing what is the creative art of the possible around putting the pieces together when it comes to that. And the third one. So the statement, there is no developer marketing. There was at least one book written about it. And I do have to say, I wholly agree with that statement. This is not trying to disagree with it, but we have found that when it comes to our experience on the portal and the traffic that we are receiving is not always just the developer. So yes, we do not overly market, and we're not trying to make things glossy and shiny for the developer, but when we get non-developer traffic, we still want to capture that into a flow and lead them down a path that makes sense for that persona, right? So at first, our strategy was to be very gung-ho about putting the developer as a first-class citizen, and then we started realizing we're alienating an audience that we had gathered, kind of, not necessarily by accident, but they were there, and so, let's do something so that we're continuing to capture them instead of telling them, go somewhere else, right? Because they did come to developer.factset.com for a reason, so it's not, it wasn't an accident on that side, either through Google search or pre-sales or some other method. So we have what we call a business workflow, really wanting to capture the buyer and not just the technical and the developer side of it. At the same time, we're keeping low friction, so it's not intended for the developer to kind of waste their time in necessarily. And it does provide a different path to what end up being the same APIs, but with much more of a business lens and trying to view these families of APIs in terms of their function from the outside client perspective. So once we released it, our stats told us that it was consistently one of the top 10 page views within the site. So we feel like that was a good experiment. We had a 70% retention rate, which was one of the highest pages on the whole developer site itself. And so it kind of backs up this idea that the hypothesis that we were getting non-technical traffic, and so why not continue to leverage that? And this is just a work in progress. This was the first thing we threw together, honestly. We feel we could do even better, but the experiment worked, so we're going to continue. All right, so what do those things all say, put together? Same foundation, the checklist for everybody is pretty much the same. You have to have your catalog, you have to have your documentation, got to have your code snippets, SDKs, right? All of those pieces need to be there. But you can always build a different blueprint on top of that same foundation. I think that's the end result of what we've come to so far. And really, our journey is only kind of beginning in space. So, yeah, it's just a little interesting tack on where we're going with it. And anybody have any questions?
We do have some time for questions. Anybody has any questions?
I was the guy who was going to speed up the schedule, so now,
there's one question.
You guys are back on schedule.
Do you guys have a Stack Overflow type of discussion forum?
Oh, yes. It's not officially moderated, but there's some presence there, yes. Right.
Peer-to-peer engagement, or is it more still?
A little. That's one of the other challenges I left out of the many bullet points that probably could have added to it was there's a bit of hesitancy from the client base to make a lot of that public when it comes to capital markets infrastructure development, right? There's enough information that could leak when asked, public questions. And so we've frankly struggled to have public developer community building as a result. There's just so much Goldman can share with JP Morgan about what they're trying to get done, right? So, yes.
But it's still like moderated public.
Right. When it's specific to how to use our APIs, that's what they come there for. But it's pretty shallow, to be honest. Right?
I do have a question until somebody else will come up with something. But I want to double click on what you mentioned about marketing to the buyers.
Right.
And having the developers as first-class citizen, but still needed to market to the buyer and the monetization and that aspect. If you want to, so how did you have this discovery and how you kind of went about solving that persona?
Yeah. Well, it was twofold. I think we realized there were a lot of different leaves of the API. If you call each API in the catalog kind of a leaf, we didn't have enough of a vision of that, what that tree might look like. And so we started coming up with that, are you doing portfolio management or are you a quant? And these are the set of APIs that work for you. And then another outcome was we did work pretty hard to change some major parts of the site to be super technical, right? Just say, we're going to make this technical and send other users to another part of the site. And we pretty much had a rebellion, to be honest. So we actually rolled back that plan. And since then, I've been trying to embrace that non-technical, just because the traffic is pretty significant. I mean, it's 30 to 40%. And the hard part was the capture, right? The people are coming to the site. So it seemed a little unnecessary to then shunt them immediately somewhere else, right? It's out of their search and their desire to be on the site, then we might as well make an experience for them.
Very good, very good. Thank you. Have any questions? Any other questions? All right, so that's a wrap. Thank you so much, Koichi.
Thank you
So much. Thank you.